The Brewers are still hot, still the best team in baseball, swept a road trip, best 60-game start in franchise history, first team to 70 wins, got there the quickest in franchise history. What else did they do? They set a record for the most hits that they've gotten as a team within a 3-game series. They're just knocking down all kinds of precedent for the franchise and some pretty big stuff. We'll break it all down this week on the Brewer Fanatic podcast. But before we jump into all the action, as always, we have the customary question about how we're doing, what we're planning for our weekends. And as I always do, I'll let you go first, Spencer.
I'm doing well. Busy day for me. Went from work directly to basketball, directly to a coach's meeting, directly into this. So, been a very busy day in general, especially because I leave in the morning for just a trip up to Door County. So I will, it's just a very long little 2-day stretch here for me, but I'm very much looking forward to the weekend up there. It'll be whole extended family, a bunch of people I don't see a ton. Some people flying in from like the Philly area, New Jersey area to be up there. So get to see a bunch of family members I don't normally get to see, hang out with them, have hopefully a somewhat relaxing weekend while doing it at the same time. So I'm very much looking forward to that, but it's been a busy week, but I'm doing well. How about you, Jack?
Well, before I answer that, you say all this stuff about your upcoming vacation when I know darn well you're going to be posted up in the corner posting Jesus Made highlights the entire weekend from your phone.
Okay, we can't rule that out. That's on the table, but I'm going to try to put family over Jesus Made. In terms of general priorities, I don't know which one I land on, but I'm, just in terms of the way things should go, I have to give the family a little bit more attention than Jesus Made. But yeah, I'm not going to rule it out. You might still see tweets of video for me.
I'm expecting it. I'm doing well, covering the games this weekend. That's about all there is to it. Let's jump into the on-field action. As I mentioned, the Brewers going 6-0 on the road trip within the last week, starting in Washington, D.C., where they played a Little League team that goes by the name of the Washington Nationals. And they stomped on the Nationals pretty good in this series. They did it at home already, and now they did it on their turf. Game 1, the Brewers put up, well, first I should just read off like the run totals for this entire series. Game 1, 16 runs. Game 2, 8 runs. Game 3, 14 runs scored by the Milwaukee Brewers. So a lot of offense in this series here. A lot of hitting, a lot of really bad pitching by the Nationals, a lot of really bad defense by the Nationals. This is a team that if you look at ERA minus, so you adjust ERA for the ballparks you're pitching in and kind of how those ballparks impact offense. The Nationals are the worst in baseball. They're worse than the Rockies once you do that park adjustment because remember, the Rockies are pitching in Coors where offense is inflated. And that's just earned runs. I didn't even look at runs allowed, which is going to factor in the defense even a little bit more. I would be willing to guess that if they're not the worst in terms of runs allowed per 9, they're probably bottom 2 or bottom 3. So this is a team that is really, really bad at keeping runs off the board, and we definitely saw a lot of it over the weekend. But we'll start with game 1. Like I said, Brewers 16, Washington 9, and it really wasn't even that close for a good majority of the night. This is an Apple TV exclusive, so Blake Perkins introducing himself to the Apple TV audience by homering twice. A lot of big showings in this one, which you're going to have when it's a 16-run game. So I'll rattle them off really quickly here. William Contreras went 5 for 7 with a double. Andrew Vaughn went 3 for 5 with a homer. Andre Monasterio went 4 for 6 with a double. And Caleb Durbin went 3 for 6 in this one as well. Jose Quintana was on the bump. He went 5 innings, scattered 6 hits, walked a couple guys, 2 earned runs for him, 4 strikeouts, gave up a homer. Like I mentioned, for most of this one, the Brewers were kind of on cruise control until Easton McGee was asked to mop up the final 2 innings. First one went pretty smoothly for him, but he gave up 5 in the 9th, was able to get it done, but not before the Brewers needed to kind of start stirring a little bit in that bullpen. He hasn't pitched since. He would eventually be optioned to Nashville a couple days later, on Thursday morning, actually, for a corresponding move that's likely to follow that we'll talk about in a few minutes. So unfortunate to see him struggle because I do still like the stuff and I like the makeup for Easton McGee. it is a little bit unfortunate. This was also like the second time in 3 days that he was thrown into multi-inning mop-up duty, and I would imagine that's something he's not very used to doing, especially in AAA where these guys are usually pitching on schedules, like they're scheduled to pitch that day. So it's very kind of metered out in that way. But still, I don't think that's an excuse for the kind of outing that he had. It seemed like the wheels started spinning once a couple guys got on base. He got squeezed a little bit on some calls. There was a little bit of soft contact early in the inning. But as it kept going on, then he legitimately started getting battered around a little bit. So we'll see if we see him again. I believe he's been sent down 4 times. So he only gets one more after this where they can go up and down before you expose him to waivers. So depending on how things shake out, that might mean it's a little bit before we see him again. But that's everything that happened within the playing field, within fair territory. And then on the sideline, we also had Pat Murphy pulling out a pocket pancake on Apple TV.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. And, that's, I mean, it was a good introduction for, I think, even some of the national audience to see the type of person that Pat Murphy is and just the type of guy he is and the humor. And honestly, the timing of him pulling it out was pretty impressive. It sounds like it was kind of pre-planned for the broadcast. But he still nailed the timing of it. Like it was perfect. Just kind of playing it off like, oh, actually I've got a pancake right here in my pocket. And shout out to Trisha Whitaker, I believe, right? That was the sideline reporter, for actually being willing to take a bite of that. I'm not sure that's something I would have taken a bite out of, but she was willing to take one. So shout out to her. And no, that was a fun moment. And I mean, it is the type of personality that Murph has and has shown since his, intro press conference. You kind of saw it when he was the bench coach and everything else, but like even right away when he was getting introduced as the manager, you could just tell there was, pretty good sense of humor. And also just for me, like it's the type of humor that I really enjoy, which is just more of like a dry type of humor where you can't totally tell if he's serious or not at all times. You kind of always have to wonder if this is like a real thing that happens. But we should note that Adam McKelvey wrote about some of this stuff last year at the end of the year. I think there's a quote from Christian Yelich that was like, if Murph ever tries to hand you food, do not eat it. Like, don't eat it. That's been in his pocket. He called him, I think, pouch, something pancake pouch, whatever. It was something along those lines. But no, that was a very funny moment. And it was nice to see just kind of everybody get a little bit of a taste of Pat Murphy, I think. And they obviously blew up on social media and everything, but a very fun moment during a very fun game in general. So yeah, that was a good time.
He's a very media friendly manager.
Yes.
You can say that much. Game 2, the Brewers unfortunately only scoring single digit runs in this one, an 8-2 final. We'll focus a little bit more on the pitching side on this one because it was Brandon Woodruff day. And the line, once again, very good for him. 6 innings. The only hit he gave up was a solo homer. Not a solo homer. But the only hit he gave up was the home run. 2 earned runs for him. Only walked 1, 8 strikeouts. But the big takeaway here is that the average velocity on the 4 and the 2-seamer combined was up to 94 in this one. This is the hardest he'd been throwing in any of his starts. The season is going along, and the stuff keeps getting even crisper for him. So that can only be a good sign for Brandon Woodruff and the Brewers.
Yeah, seeing, a decent amount of 95s and 96s flashing up on the screen during the game, it was just like, oh, okay. Like you saw him touch it once or twice in some of the other starts, and he could rear back and get to it when he felt he really needed it. But this time it felt more like he wasn't necessarily even having to do that it was just kind of coming out that crisp. And yeah, this just continuing to see improvement from him pretty much start to start in the stuff has been even more impressive or surprising in a very pleasant way as he's gone along. Like the Brewers kind of maintained that this is what they thought was going to happen when they brought him back. They talked about this. They kind of thought like, oh, it'll keep coming back as he goes. And I didn't really think that was going to be the case, but to this point, that absolutely has been the case. And I mean, a very good outing against obviously not a very good team, but yeah, I mean, it was really just back-to-back hitters. He walked the guy and then gave up the homer on back-to-back hitters, and it was basically perfect outside of that stretch. So just really good to see, and seeing that velo creep up more and more is just, I mean, I just can't really. It's so surprising to me. It's been such a pleasant surprise to see it, and if it keeps going, I mean, I don't even know, because he has added all these other he's added some secondaries. He's improved some of that. Command probably was its best in that first start back in Miami still, but it's still pretty good, and he's still on the attack.
Like that's about the best command I've ever seen. So
right. But it's still been pretty good, and he's still on the attack. So like, it's just every single thing seems to be there for Woodruff, and it's unfortunate. In reality, like we talked about back at the time, I think the setbacks ended up being good for him, but it would have been cool if he was actually at this point and then able to start making starts a little earlier in the season and see where he was at this point. I mean, maybe it'll keep climbing from here, but just really, really impressive stuff. And like I said, the Brewers were convinced this was going to be the case. I was not, and I am glad that they seem to have been correct on that.
It's going to make for some interesting discussion once we get closer to playoff time for how the Brewers line things up. I know we talked about it a little bit last week. We got a question on it this week too. But they're going to have some interesting decisions to make here, because I'm with you in that camp. Like, I wasn't expecting any of this. Not at this point. Like, if you would have told me he was showing this maybe in 2026,
right,
then I would have believed you, but not to see it right now. Like, the season that he comes back from, the kind of procedure that he had.
Yeah.
Flipping over to the offensive side of this one, the Brewers getting on the board right away with 3 runs in the first inning on a string of singles. We've seen the Brewers do plenty of this. Christian Yelich adding a little bit more with a home run in the third. And then within the final 2 innings, Bryce Turang and Isaac Collins each adding some late insurance with RBI doubles. Between Game 2 and Game 3, the Brewers made a roster move. Jacob Miserowski, who was scheduled to start Game 3, was placed on the 15-day IL with a left tibia contusion. So in layman's terms, the shin bruise from the ball that got him on the shin in that Cubs start. He's expecting to miss the minimum amount of time per reporters who are in Washington. And to me, this really just seems like, I think it's a legitimate injury. This is something that happened last week, but this seems to me like 95% of the time a guy would pitch through a bruise on his shin. But I think this is just kind of a convenient opportunity for the Brewers to manage the innings a little bit more. You get to skip a couple starts before getting him back on the bump. And I think that's more what this is about than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I'm not surprised that they would handle a guy like Miserowski with kind of like an overabundance of caution. Like, they're going to be careful with him in general. But like you said, I think if this was coming down to the final week, game or two difference between the Brewers and Cubs, and Jacob Miserowski scheduled to start, like, they're not skipping that start. He's pitching in that situation, or the playoffs, obviously. I think it is mostly to manage the innings here, and like, that's fine. It gives them a somewhat convenient reason to do it, and again, it allows them to be careful with him just generally, because while you don't really think it would affect anything on the mound, and it's pretty unlikely to, the only thing it can change is if you start changing your mechanics because you're uncomfortable with landing or whatever. Like, there are things that could happen if the shin is bothering him enough where he doesn't feel super comfortable, like planting hard on it when he lands, or anything like that. But I don't really think that was the case. I think this is really just a matter of, it gives them a reason to do it. It gives them an ability to do it. And I believe he would be lined up to return during that 5-game in 4 days series against the Cubs as well. So I'm sure that makes it a little bit easier as well, just to kind of plan that out. And because they backdated it, we should note as well the 3 days that they're allowed to. So that lines him up for that series.
It'll bring us to our first question. Ben on Twitter asked, I support the team managing Mrs. Innings, but does the recent IL move risk alienating him? It now seems a long shot he finishes first or second in Rookie of the Year. With that, he loses some leverage in negotiations and gets to free agency a year later. I mean, there always is a risk when you do this. I'm also a little bit skeptical that with the way they were managing the innings anyway, that he was like for sure going to finish 1 or 2 in Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
So a lot of it probably comes down to how much is this actually impacting that. I know we'd mentioned a few weeks ago that he probably had a pretty good case, but we'll talk about Isaac Collins in a couple minutes too, who now all of a sudden is someone who is playing almost every day as a position player and putting up the value he is. He might now be a little bit more of a front runner than Jacob Miserowski even. But I think, if it was going to continue to a point with just, let's assume that he did make these starts, and if these starts were instead like 3-inning starts,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if you're cutting 6 innings off of his season total, or whatever, 6 to 12 innings, maybe if you want to assume they're full length starts, like, is that really going to do a whole lot for the candidacy? I'm not sure. But this also just isn't the first time that the Brewers have done this, and they don't tend to make exceptions on this kind of stuff. I also think that just in this case, it is a lot easier to point to an actual reason outside of the service time for doing this, because there legitimately is a case to be made that managing the innings here is best for his long-term health. And maybe they have a discussion with him along the lines of, irregardless of what this does for your odds of getting a full year for winning an award, if we think this is going to keep you in the big leagues longer anyway, is a kind of a moot point.
Right. I think part of it here is that, like, this isn't the main reason they're doing this. I think there's a difference there. If that's what you're chasing, the Brewers are going after it and saying, like, okay, we got to limit his innings because we don't want him to finish top 2 and lose a year of his control. Like, that's not what they're doing. The main reason they're limiting innings and being safe with him is because they want Miz to be a pitcher for them for the long haul, and they want to be able to try and keep him healthy as best as they can. And there's no perfect science to that. It's not something that they have a set innings limit. We've talked about that a bunch of times now, but like, that's not the main point here for them. They're not going after and chasing or trying to purposely avoid him finishing top 2. Now, does it factor in? I'm sure it does. I'm sure there's at least in their heads, they're like, little benefit of this is that we probably don't lose that year. But while they're competing, while they're trying to go win a division, maybe finish top 2 and avoid the wild card this year, like, they want to win, and they believe Miz gives them a good chance to do that. So they're not just going to push him aside and try and keep that extra year in favor of, or in the process, potentially losing some solid starting pitching and some good outings from him just because of that reason. So I think that's part of it. And like you said, I'm sure there was a conversation with him about kind of what the plan is the entire time. So I'm sure he knew there was a possibility of, like, hey, if something crops up or pops up for you at some point, like, then we might put you on the IL to be overly safe and also give us the ability to kind of keep you in a better place, total innings. Like, I would be surprised if they didn't at least bring that up to him at some point as a possibility. So, yeah, I get it. I think there are players who would probably take it pretty poorly. And I think if the Brewers were bad right now and they did it, there'd be a lot more reason to be upset about it if you were in Miz's spot. But I think it's a little different with the spot they're in. Like, they're not purposely going to do this if they're not going to, again, lessen their team and make their team worse on purpose just to try and save that extra year. So I don't think it's a huge deal, but I do get it. I think it's a fair question. I don't know that he loses leverage in negotiations. I guess I should say that. Like, that part of the equation, I don't really think matters. Maybe in arbitration, because of how that is handled. I guess if that's what you're talking about, I could see that being a bit of a problem for him at times, because arbitration does look at past performances and awards and everything else. But when it comes to the Brewers or any other team who are negotiating him with an extension or a free agent deal down the line, like none of them are going to care if he was top 2 in in rookie of the year, his rookie season. So yeah, I'm rambling a bit, but like, I don't think it's a huge deal, and I doubt that Miz is taking it too poorly. My guess is Miz wants to pitch, so he's probably not thrilled that he's on the IL for that reason. But I can't imagine this is a huge deal in his eyes at the moment.
Logan Henderson would come up from Nashville and get the spot start in Jacob Miserowski's place in a 14-3 Brewers win in the series finale. So Henderson pitched into the 5th. He went 4 1/3, only gave up 3 hits, a couple of walks, and earned run. Struck out 4. The big takeaway from this start, for me at least, was how many cutters we saw in this one. He used it like almost 20% of the time, which is way more than we had seen it in any of his previous handful of starts in the big leagues. And interestingly enough, it looked like in Nashville he was throwing the slider a lot more than the cutter. Now, I'm going to guess there was a reason for that, and we'll kind of get into it right now. I think that between those two pitches, because he's got that big pronation bias and he struggles to get on the outside side of the ball, I think the cutter is way more attainable for him because that's a pitch that you can still throw with a decent amount of backspin and still have an okay cutter. Versus if you're trying to throw a slider, like that's when you really do want to be able to actually, kind of get on that outside side and get in front of it more as you're snapping it off, which you don't always have to do with a cutter, depending on what kind of cutter you're trying to throw. But in his case, it's always probably going to be a little bit more of like a backspin carry kind of cutter. But if that's what he can nail down a little more consistently and like get some more consistent glove side cut, the shape was better in this outing too. I should note that as well. Most of those cutters, any movement they had left and right, they were going to the glove side instead of kind of a toss up between whether it does break that way or whether it backs up on him a little bit. That's going to be big for him. And another part of this too is it does seem like he has liked to use it in these outings to kind of go like backdoor to lefties a lot. That's when we saw it a lot in this start. So, especially if you're going to throw it like that, then you really don't need a ton of movement on it because you don't need a whole lot to get guys to give up on it on that outside corner, especially if you're hitting them with fastball changeup. So I think the cutter is like, that's the one that if he's going to figure out a third pitch, I think that's the one he's going to figure out, which is probably why I'm guessing that they had him throwing so many sliders in Nashville because if they know, hey, this is the one you can probably figure out, let's throw the one that you haven't figured out yet while you're down here because we really need to figure out, is there any possible way that you can throw this pitch? And if you exhaust all the options there in AAA and it just isn't happening, then okay, now the cutter is the one that we really go all in on as the third pitch.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we kind of talked about that a couple weeks ago when we brought him up, that we both kind of agreed that the cutter was the most likely one to work out for him as a third pitch. I think he only threw 2 sliders in this outing, and they honestly were probably a bit better as well than what we had seen for the most part from him. Seemed like they had more depth to him, but he can't get anything glove side with him. Like it's pretty much just going to be the depth on the pitch. Yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to is in the end, it's not even that much different than like the change up movement. I mean, it is, but it's like you don't have anything going glove side, and the cutter he seems more comfortable with. Like you said, being behind the ball a little bit more is easier to do with that supination when you're a heavy pronation bias type of guy. So you really don't have to change the axis of your fingers a ton. You just kind of got to change where you place them on the ball and just be able to get a little bit of supination on it. And it was a pretty decent pitch for him in this one. And like you said, I think showing a comfortability with going back door, that does help. Like that, you can throw the changeup off of that. You get guys you get some chase on fastballs off of the plate as well, because guys have to protect it thinking that it might cut back over the edge of the plate. And yeah, I think that's the one they're going to end up using. Honestly, it wouldn't shock me if at some point the sliders mostly just dropped from the repertoire. But like you said, while he's in AAA, and he probably will be again when Miz comes back, they might as well. Like there's nothing hurting him there. I promise the Brewers are not concerned about the results down there for him when he goes down there. Like they are trying to figure out exactly what he can and can't do, because they know it can play at the big league level with what he has, but they know that eventually it's going to catch up to him a little bit. So now you got to find different ways to make it work. Kind of like we talked about with Yoho. I think it was last episode or the time before when we talked about him. Just like when he goes down there, I don't care about the results right now. I want to see him figure out how he can get outs at the big league level while he's down there, and there can be some trial and error. And I think that's what they're doing with the slider for Henderson.
The Brewers got 16 hits in this one to set that team record that I alluded to earlier, 56 hits in a 3-game span. Bryce Turang homered twice in this one. I'm not going to go through the laundry list of all these hits, but Turang homering twice is the one I wanted to highlight just because I did a story on him. Came out on Saturday, so the day before this game, about, I had mentioned this before on the show, like just the amount of hidden power that's actually in that bat compared to what we see in games. And talked to Murph a little bit, talked to Connor Dawson for a little bit about just some of the stuff that they're doing behind the scenes, including in some of those BP sessions, about how the Brewers think he can get to a point where he is catching the ball out in front more and tapping into that power. But at the same time, there's a reason why he continues to not actually pull the ball in the air that much in games, because that's his established profile. That's what they know he can do. And something Dawson talked about as well is like, you can't force that contact point out in front.
Yeah.
That's got to happen a little bit more organically as he's swinging harder, as he's adding more bat speed. Basically, you can't be cheating out there. If you're cheating out there for a fastball and not getting there naturally, then you're very vulnerable to pulling off speed stuff because you're way, way out in front. You lose your ability to wait back on anything. Just go read the story. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I think one of my favorites to write so far this year, especially since I don't always dip into the hitting side as often as I do the pitching side. But to see 2 homers from him in this one, just kind of a reminder of like, yeah, when he does get there, when he gets the ball out in front, especially for a guy who doesn't look at first glance like he's that strong, there is a lot of raw power in this bat, a lot more than I would have guessed leading into this year. And I think a lot more than most people would guess just from watching him in games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will push it for you as well. You should go read the article. Like, it was very well written. There were a lot of good quotes from, and we don't hear from hitting coaches a ton in general, just they're not super available. Partially because they have a lot going on pregame, obviously, but it was cool to hear from actually, Connor Dawson, get some quotes from him and hear kind of what the actual plan and process is for trying to eventually make this maybe a little bit more of the profile, but not forcing it, like you said. But yeah, normally we have to talk about how you jinxed a guy, but this one I think went the opposite way. We got a 2-homer game right after it, so that was perfect timing and probably exactly what you're looking for as a writer when you write something like that. So that was very nice of him to appease you on that. But no, he does have power, like way more than I thought Bryce Turang had in him. Like, even just when he does hit these home runs, like some of them have been high exit velocity, like big time homers with quite a bit of distance to them. And it shows what's in there for him. And like, I think there's a world where he can hit 20 plus homers. And I would have,
if it all clicks the right way, absolutely. There's that much raw power in there.
Right. I would have never said that heading into the season. Like, not even, I was kind of in like the maybe 15 and probably more like what I talked about with Frelick, where I was like, yeah, I could see double-digit homers for Turang. Probably a little bit more than what Frelick has there, but 20 seems attainable in like the near future if he can find the best way to kind of combine what he's doing now, what he's already good at, and then also finding a way to more consistently catch the ball out in front and drive it to the pull side. And it's honestly not that dissimilar to what Yelich was in Miami to a degree. Like, Yelich got to the power more consistently than Turang did, but that was always kind of the talking point with him when he was in Miami. Like, if he just hits the ball in the air to the pull side more, like, there is power there, but he only had, I think he had only topped out at like 19, maybe 20 in Miami before getting to Milwaukee and obviously exploding in the second half of 18 and then having the huge 2019. I don't expect that ever, but the fact that I can actually see a 20 homer future for Turang is, I mean, that could be an extremely valuable player at that point if he is actually tapping into the power while also maintaining what he's already been quite good at offensively. And yeah, that's exciting. We talked about at one point early in the season when he was showing some of this, that if we were going to extend any of the young players that aren't already extended, like Cherio, that Turang would probably be the one. Like, this even kind of further solidifies that for me. Like, I would have no issue with the Brewers going out and trying to extend him this offseason and buy out some years of free agency if they really think the power is going to show up in games, especially.
Yeah, there's a ridiculously high ceiling there. Like, you're talking one of the best second basemen in baseball.
Oh, yeah.
If he can if he kind of grows into that power element a little more, and he's already trending in the right way. But again, read the story if you want to get the full gist on that. I'll stop promoting my own work now, but I just had to throw that out there. DL Hall was tasked with throwing the final 3 innings of this one. Got through the first 2, couldn't finish it off in the 9th. I'm not going to hash on it too much because we talked about it last week. Like, there's regression coming there, and we saw it again in that final inning. Grant Anderson had to come in. He was able to clean things up to secure that 14-3 victory and the sweep in DC. The Brewers then went to Atlanta and swept again. They didn't score quite as many runs in this series, but things remained very sharp on the run prevention side. Game 1, the Brewers winning this one 3-1. We'll start with Quinn Priester, who got the bump in this one, or was on the bump in this one for the Brewers. Gave up a leadoff home run, shut it down the rest of the way. 7 innings for him, 2 hits, just that run on the homer, couple of walks and 4 Ks. And then on the offensive side, Isaac Collins was the entirety of the offense in this one, a 3-run home run in the 4th. That brings us to a question from Nate, who asked one of us to please translate the Fangraphs article about Isaac Collins into something more closely resembling English. So for those of you who may have seen it, may not have seen it, Michael Bauman at Fangraphs wrote a story or an analysis on Isaac Collins where he just kind of looked into the value he's been providing for the Brewers. He really focused a lot on just the fact that Isaac Collins walks a lot, because if you look at Isaac Collins's offensive profile, that really is the one thing that'll jump out to you, is he does this really, really well. I believe Kurt wrote about it recently too, about how he just doesn't chase. He's got really, really good plate discipline. Something that the Brewers definitely value, but Collins just doesn't chase pitches out of the strike zone, draws a lot of walks. And he kind of looked at players who derive like a significant chunk of their value from walks. So he kind of went in and he broke down some guys along those lines, like the guys who have been just given the most run value, provided the most run value by drawing walks. And then also guys who like get the highest percentage of their overall offensive value from drawing walks. And Isaac Collins, oddly enough, wasn't on either one of those lists. He was kind of like in the just missed territory of it, which there's a couple ways you can read that. You could say that's a good thing because maybe it means he's a little more well-rounded. But really, like, the bottom line of the story was it's kind of hard to tell right now. Like, is Isaac Collins actually a good hitter in the big league level? But at the very least, like, right now he's doing enough where you combine that with the plate discipline and he's giving the Brewers value. And that was basically the takeaway of the story. I've like tried looking at this stuff with Isaac Collins, and this is probably not going to be like a super popular take, especially as we're seeing people float around like rookie of the year candidacy, like Isaac Collins. In terms of like what the actual results, what he's done, he probably should be the favorite because he's like, how many wins? But is he like closing in on 3 WAR?
He may have hit it this series. If not, he's at like 2.9.
Yeah. So because you like really good defense in left field, he's got like a 130 WRC plus at this point. Like,
yeah.
Now, when you actually get into how sustainable is that, that's where I start to see some chinks in the armor a little bit. So the plate discipline's really good. The pitches he chooses to swing at, the contact rates are pretty average, but the next like closest thing offensively that you can say to him having a strength is he's above average at pulling the ball in the air. So you look at like the home runs he's hit, he's kind of wrapped a lot of those around the foul lines, which is what you need to do if you're not someone who hits the ball super hard, and he doesn't hit the ball super hard. If you can kind of loft it and get it in the air and tuck it down the line where the distance from home plate is the shortest, that's kind of a way that you can get to some power. Isaac Paredes is really good at it. It's what Caleb Durbin did in the minor leagues that allowed him to hit double-digit home runs despite basically never hitting the ball hard. Collins has a little bit of that. He's not like it. He's not extreme in that regard, but he's above average. But like the fact of the matter is, I went through his spray charts during the week and I watched a lot of his hits over and over again. There are a lot of like 75, 80 mile an hour bloop singles in there. And I still maintain that there are like select guys like Tony Gwynn. You could probably argue like Ichiro had it too. And then like the closest to a modern day counterpart is Luis Ariz, like guys who I think legitimately have the ability to do that and repeat it, like bloop hits and just hit them where the fielders are not positioned. I think that's also a very rare skill though. So if Isaac Collins is doing it, I'm not going to say Isaac Collins has that skill. I'm going to say Isaac Collins, good for him putting the bat on the ball, but he's getting some breaks here. And I don't think Isaac Collins is trying to hit, a 75 mile an hour kind of bloop single most of the time. And I would imagine those hits are going to start to dry up. So I think there's going to be some pretty serious regression that hits either within this year or maybe it comes next year. I think true talent, he's like a close to league average hitter who plays really, really good defense in left field. And that's absolutely a quality major leaguer. No offense to Isaac Collins. This is not legit. What he's doing right now, I don't think it's legitimate. Like the offense to this level. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that just objectively as an analyst. I mean, the last time that I entertained something like this, I said this to you before we started, was when Omar Narvaez was kind of doing this trick. And to be fair to Collins, like Omar Narvaez had a way worse quality of contact than Isaac Collins. Like Collins doesn't hit the ball super hard, but Narvaez was way worse. Yeah. But we learned from that one. That didn't hold up either. So more often than not, you are best off assuming like if it looks fluky, it probably is. Yeah. To the point that he's like looking like an awesome hitter. He's not an awesome hitter. I think he's a capable one in the big leagues, and you pair that with some of the other tools, like he's a very nice kind of expanded bench piece. And right now the results are there, so it makes sense to keep rolling him out there.
Yeah, he's not a true talent 130 WRC plus guy. He's just not. Like it a lot of things have gone well for him this year. He does have a good approach and he does a lot of things well. And like there are reasons to believe, like you said, that he can be a league average or maybe, a tick above just because he does hit the ball at pretty decent launch angles. Like his launch angle sweet spot's pretty good in terms of how often he gets there. And so that is going to lead to some of those 75, 80 mile per hour bloop singles like you talked about, but not as often as they have happened this year. And that's fine. Like this stuff happens over the course of seasons. That's why even in a vacuum, one season in MLB can be tough to totally analyze and say like, yep, that's going to be predictive of the future, because it's not always. Even when there's some good signs with the profile, like it just launch angle stuff sometimes to me, I could see that fluctuating more often than other things do for a hitter as well. So like next year, some of those line drives that are at 20 degrees or 15 degrees that go over the infield are 10 degrees and they're right at an infielder. And all of a sudden those start to dry up and then some of the other stuff starts to dry up. And yeah, he ends up being like a 90 to 100, maybe slightly above WRC plus guy. But like you said, with great defense in left field, not the fastest guy, but actually a pretty good base runner, I think, just generally. There's plenty of value in that. And it's not that dissimilar to like Blake Perkins, who has a lot of value as well and can have stretches where he hits the ball really well. Like we're seeing on this road trip, he had a very good offensive trip, but he also ends up being closer to like a probably 90-ish WRC plus guy on true talent. So like these things, it's been awesome for the Brewers. It's awesome for Isaac Collins. It's a very cool story for a guy who was a minor league Rule 5 draft pick only a couple of seasons ago. But I agree that you can't expect this from Isaac Collins moving forward. He's 28. I think he can be a major league player who helps the Brewers for multiple more years, but not to this level. So hopefully for the Brewers' sake and for Collins' sake, it does continue for the rest of this season, and then we have to figure out what happens next year. That would be the most ideal scenario, I think. But I do think there's a chance it's not going to, and people should probably be kind of prepared for it.
Monasterio is probably also a decent recent comp for this as well. Like this is kind of what Monasterio had going. It didn't last as long and it wasn't as extreme as this is, but the general gist of like, yeah, he's getting some looping line drives that are
right,
getting over some heads in the infield, falling in the shallow outfield. And then you pair that with really solid plate discipline. Like you get a guy who, for a stretch of time looks like he's well above average, but then it comes down to earth quite a bit. And I don't think Collins is not going to fall as far as Monasterio has, but kind of the larger point of it. It's just long-term, this is not going to keep happening, until I see something in the process that suddenly looks way, way different than it has up to this point. Game 2, the Brewers taking this one by a final of 7-2. Freddy Peralta'd his way through 5 innings of 1-run baseball. This is a Freddy classic. Scattered 4 hits, walked 3 guys, struck out 7. The stuff was not hittable when he was in the strike zone, but it took him 108 pitches to get through 5. And just, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. His command was like non-existent in this start.
Yeah, no. Not, I mean, it looked more like the Freddy that we've had numerous complaints about last season, mostly when we talked about him. And I mean, that's kind of been the trend for the last few starts out of the All-Star break. And it's still a small sample of not great starts versus a lot of the good that we saw early in the year. But hopefully he can kind of buck this trend soon, because if he keeps looking like this could be a bit of a problem for the Brewers. And I'll let you ask the question, because I think it's a fair question that I'm not sure the Brewers will entertain much, but go ahead.
John on Twitter asked, is it and should it be a given that Peralta starts in a wild card series? Think I'd feel better about Woodruff, Quinn Priester, and probably Miz ahead of him. I would agree with you. This version of Freddy Peralta, I'm just not trusting him to start a playoff game. It's tricky. I think you could make a case for starting him over Priester depending on the matchup. Because Freddy has been there before. And you know that, like, even in a lot of these outings, he never really gets hit. It's just more so like, I think the bigger thing actually probably needs to be, if he's starting a game, you need to have like a backup bulk guy on hand. So maybe that is he starts a game, but Priester needs to be ready, or Jose Quintana needs to be ready. Although I'd rather it be Priester, because I don't really want to go from Freddy to Quintana nibbling as your fallback plan. But the larger point of, if he starts a playoff game, I would not be expecting him to give you a whole lot of length. And I think you need to be prepared to pull the plug if he doesn't have it, as opposed to this, he's a veteran, let him work through it thing that I could see, Pat Murphy kind of abiding by. But yeah, if he's looking like this, and again, just kind of more fuel to the fire of, he can have stretches where he's better than this, but he never really puts it behind him for good. And I do think that is something you need to be thinking about. But given his standing in the rotation for several years now, I mean, he's going to start game 1 of a playoff series. He's going to, and I would be shocked if he doesn't.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I would, to answer the question, is it a given? If he's healthy, yes, he will be starting. Should it be? I think that's a very fair question, and I would agree with pretty much everything Jack laid out there, where I personally would be, I'd be nervous sending Freddy out there in any playoff game. And you could get a great start from Freddy Peralta and it wouldn't be a surprise at all. But you could get a bad one and it would not be a surprise at all either. And I think like Jack said, if you go and you have somebody ready, if he starts getting in early trouble and you're willing to pull the plug, then I won't have too many concerns because I think you can handle that with the type of pitching staff that you have. But if you are going to send him out there and you are going to treat him like a true veteran ace who, he gets the benefit of the doubt here no matter what, like we have to trust him, then I think that's a mistake. Then I think that's probably not the right way to handle things. So it can be fine that he starts, but you have to be willing to pull the plug early if it's not going well.
The Brewers largely benefiting from a 4-run fourth inning in this one, and the runs scored in the form of a Christian Yelich 2-out infield single with the bases loaded, then a wild pitch with the bases loaded, and then an Andrew Vaughn 2-run single with the bases loaded. So a very Brewers way of scoring, and that kind of led into this whole post-game debate that I saw going on online. I think I'd maybe seen this account once before, but basically it's a model that somebody built that uses StatCast data to determine, who should have won the game based on luck or the way that things usually go with the kind of contact that was made throughout a game. So it's MLB deserved to win-o-meter. It's at MLB_simulator. You can check it out for yourself if you want. I don't think this is a terrible model. I think that a lot of times, like, stuff like this is good to look at because I think it can, in the right situations, actually tell you a little more about how you actually played than the results in a small sample. I don't think this is this is not something you should be treating as gospel, though, because I mean, just exit velo and launch angle, while I think it often is pretty useful, I mean, you gotta know the context of everything is really what it comes down to. And I do think for a lot of teams, this would probably give you a pretty good indicator. But as I pointed out, I think that the Brewers are engineered a little bit to kind of excel at some stuff that's going on in between lines there that just those two metrics of exit velo and launch angle are not always going to capture. So that leads us to a question from Michael, who asked, care to expound on Jack's tweet regarding luck merchants? I'm particularly interested in the first point he made about, and how it applies to the offense, where I said the Brewers are built in a way that's designed to overperform the deserved or expected outcomes assigned by some metrics. So, number one, I think the way that they take extra bases is a big part of this here.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you actually look at the StatCast expected metrics, the Brewers are right in line with their expected metrics. What it is more so is their WOBA and their expected WOBA don't line up with the number of runs that they're scoring.
Yeah.
And that's where you start getting into the impact of, they take a lot of extra bases in other ways, which can diminish the need to hit 4 extra bases to drive those guys in because they're moving up in different ways. I still think the home run ball is pretty important and the Brewers need to do more of that. But, I think they can get away with hitting, a little bit, a couple fewer doubles, for example, because they're able to move up in some of those other ways. And that's a big deal here. I know a lot of people talk about the speed and the infield hits. StatCast actually includes sprint speed in xWOBA when guys hit ground balls. So that I actually think it captures okay. And I actually think that's the reason why the Brewers are pretty much in line WOBA, xWOBA, because I think it is accounting for the speed and the extra base hits. That's really how it applies to the offense, though. I think on the flip side, though, it actually applies a lot to the pitching and the defense, because the Brewers have pretty consistently been overperforming a lot of their expected run prevention totals. And that's kind of what happened in this one more than anything. That kind of had this model thinking that the Brewers didn't deserve to win this one. So obviously a lot of this stuff is based on the expected outcomes. What usually happens in a game when somebody hits a baseball like this, when they hit it this hard at this angle, here's what has historically usually happened. That's the other point I want to make too. So many people, I think, see these numbers and they respond to it with, well, baseball isn't played on a spreadsheet. This is all hypothetical. Not really, because this stuff is always built on what has actually happened in games. It's trying to tell you what should have happened in this moment based on what historically has happened in the past. So they're not, the nerds aren't contriving this stuff out of nothing. It is coming from what has actually happened on the baseball field. I think this is something that a lot of people don't understand about analytics. It's all coming from stuff that has actually happened on the baseball field. They don't just make it up. You can have debates about the way that information is applied or the things that are valued as you're trying to project stuff. But, you can't actually make the argument that this is all fake, because it is based off of stuff that has happened in games. That's what analytics is. It's trying to quantify what has happened on the field and then using that to evaluate stuff through, a more objective lens, or evaluate it in a way where you can more reliably predict what's going to happen, as opposed to, just kind of using the eye test. But with how that applies to the Brewers defense, because they're so rangy, like by definition, they are built to catch more balls that have historically gone for hits against most defenses, because those defenses aren't as good. So like that's kind of where that comes in there. So that's really what I was talking about when I said the Brewers are built in a way that's designed to overperform some of this stuff. But then from there, I do think they're getting a little bit lucky too. Like you look at this game in particular, the Brewers walked 8 Braves in this game, and the Braves didn't score because the Braves went 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position and left 14 guys on base. The response that I was seeing, and this is what was being pointed out by the guy who runs this simulator and some people who were defending it, basically talking about, like, that's basically what he was trying to say is like the distribution of when you get your hits is actually pretty random, which he's right about. And like people got there were some people got upset about that, saying, well, no, because you didn't get a hit there, that means you didn't hit well enough. You didn't deserve to get a hit there. So it's actually a reflection of your skill. But this is a debate that's been going on for a long time. Like, is hitting with runners in scoring position actually a skill, or is it more random? The leaving guys on base, is it actually a skill, or is it more random? Because, people have looked at the numbers here, and this is like I think it was like the 3rd or 4th bullet point that I included in my tweet about kind of how do you handle something like this. And this is where I think a lot of the analytics community gets this wrong. They're not wrong about the fact that it's like not sustainable and it's generally not repeatable. Like these people have looked at the numbers and they have seen that like hitters who are regarded as clutch, or teams that are regarded as clutch, from year to year, from like at bat to at bat, it's actually not sustained. Like it's not, they're not consistently delivering in those moments. That doesn't actually happen from one year to the next. But I think where they get it wrong is a lot of people then who see that characterize it as that means it's lucky, or, sometimes they'll say it's random. I think random is a better word to use. But like when people characterize that as lucky, I think that's where you get it wrong. I think what happens here is, let's use like Nick Mears' inning, for example. In this game, he had, what was it, bases loaded, nobody out, and he got out of the inning. I mean, the Brewers pulled that. Ashby did it too. Ashby and Mears both had bases loaded situations and had to get some big outs, and they did it. I think the way to interpret that is, depending on like if you're at, you got to actually be watching the game as it's going on, but you can say, hey, Nick Mears got out of this, or Aaron Ashby got out of this because they made big pitches, really good pitches at the right time. That means that they went out there and they legitimately performed. Like those were legitimately good pitches made at the right time when they knew they needed to make good pitches. But then you can say, over history, we have seen most players are not actually capable of doing that every time or most of the time. You give them credit for doing it in that moment. They weren't lucky because like they made the pitches. Like that is skill. Like you did it there. You did what you needed to do. You stepped up. You deserve a lot of credit for that. That's a big performance. And you should be, you should receive recognition for that. But then you can also acknowledge that's not actually a real thing to go out there for like 99% of guys and do that repeatedly. So that, like, to me, that's, yes, you had a legitimately good performance there. But there are very few players who actually repeatably most of the time when they're in that situation who do that. It's not lucky that they did it the first time because like they legitimately pulled it off. There was no, no bull crap going on there where you weaseled your way out of it. It's more so that you can't expect them to keep doing it. And that's where metrics like these and models like these are going to come in and say, hey, like history has shown that doesn't happen repeatedly. So we're not going to acknowledge it as something that you should expect to keep happening. And I think that's right. But to use the word lucky to describe that, I think that's where you're starting to rub people the wrong way. And that's kind of where the disconnect comes. And like words matter. So I think the analytics side of the game needs to stop, like make sure they're not characterizing that stuff as lucky. I don't know for sure what the better word is. Maybe like just not repeatable, like that's just tough to keep doing. But I think phrasing it like along some kind of line like that, as opposed to just calling it lucky, I would like to think that would kind of clear up some of the ways in which this stuff can be misconstrued, or some of the heat that these kinds of models catch.
Yes, the main point I was going to bring up, and you hit it home a bunch at the end there, is that like I think it's the phrasing that ends up causing as much angst by just fans of baseball in general, like calling people lucky for getting the hits in the big moments, especially. I think that's where people get upset about it. And it is kind of funny, like, okay, it's really a sequencing thing. It's when you get your hits and our guys in scoring position. And like you said, there aren't many players. I think there are a few over the history of the game that are like, yeah, they actually do seem to almost always step up in these situations and just have a different level of maybe just being able to stay calm and perform in those moments a little bit better than others do. I think there is some of that where people can kind of slow the heart rate down better. They're better in those spots than others. But overall, like over the long run, in the end, it is more random. And it's, did you get the hit in that spot in one moment? Yes. And then 3 times you didn't. But a lot of times people are going to think of you as a clutch player because you got it done the one time. I just think it's easy to look back on it and kind of view it through that lens when you watch a game and you don't necessarily remember all the bad parts. You remember the good parts for certain players and all that type of stuff. But when people start calling it lucky that the Brewers got these hits in this moment, like, let's be honest, Christian Yelich getting an infield single with the bases loaded and 2 outs, there is some luck there. Like, it is lucky. Like, that's okay to admit that your team is lucky. Most good teams are lucky. World Series teams are going to be lucky. I promise you that. There's going to be strokes of good luck throughout the playoffs. Like, that stuff happens. But when you call a team lucky for sustained success, that they are just constantly getting lucky, I think that's where the problem kind of arises and people get upset about it or they disagree with it. And I think they're correct to disagree with it. And like you said, I don't really know what the phrasing is because I think in my eyes, I view it more as somewhat random. But I think even random is probably not something people would like to hear about their team either, because I don't think it's completely random. Again, I do think there are people who can maybe get themselves in a better mental spot in those moments than others, and maybe they perform a little bit better. So it's not fully random either. Yeah, I it doesn't really roll off the tongue, but like it being not repeatable is kind of what it is. Like it's just not something you can rely on. And over the course of a season, the Brewers, again, I think with the way they play baseball, this is where some of this stuff does actually come in, where I think even in this moment, they're kind of built to become lucky. Like they kind of make their own luck to a degree, where they have a bunch of guys who they can get infield singles when they have the bases loaded with 2 outs because they are fast enough. Like you said, that doesn't really affect the ex-WOBA and the WOBA, but it does affect like somebody watching a game and going like, oh my God, they're getting lucky again. Like somebody rolled the ball out there and got an infield hit. But it's because they're a team built on speed and a team that puts the ball in play a lot when they have this situation. So you didn't strike out, you at least gave yourself a chance. Like I think the Brewers are a team that can do some of these things and create some of their own luck. But at the same time, they have had some good fortune during this. Maybe good fortune is the better way to put it. Like I think that sounds better than being lucky. Like there's been good fortune for some of the balls in play, and I think maybe that's a better way to look at it and say it. Obviously, the other part of this that we haven't really talked about is that there's also just an element of like Cubs fans wanting to annoy Brewer fans by talking about these things. Like some of this isn't even the analytics community. It is literally just a rival team wanting to annoy other fans on social media and probably doing a pretty good job of it. And frankly, I've been included at times. I'm like, all right, I don't need to see this debate every day. And I don't need to see the Brewers getting called lucky. I even saw a Cubs fan talking about how like Andrew Vaughn was getting lucky to get mistakes and hitting his homers today. And I was like, okay, no, you have to hit the mistakes. That's the whole point of being a good hitter at any point is that you hit mistakes when you get them. You miss.
And every hitter gets mistakes. That's not exclusive to Andrew Vaughn.
I was going to tweet something along those. I feel like MLB fans in general don't recognize how many mistakes happen during a game unless they're hit. Like I think people sometimes fail to realize that there are so many hung breaking balls and fastballs right down the middle that get fouled back or even taken because they just were a little off balance or something. But those are mistakes. The point of being a good hitter is you take advantage of those. And when you're on a really good run like Vaughn is, he's taking advantage of mistakes when he gets them. But that is absolutely not lucky. That is just being a hitter. That's what you're supposed to do. So yeah, I think part of it is literally just people trying to annoy you on Twitter. If you're out there, like there is a substance of that or a piece of this is related to that. But the whole thing for me is that yes, there has been luck involved. And I think it's okay to admit that for your team. Like it's okay to say that my team has been kind of lucky. It's also not the reason the Brewers are winning all these games. They have not just been lucking their way to winning 70 games before anyone else. Like they have done a lot of very good things, and they have done things that, again, kind of help them, for lack of a better term, make their own luck. Like they create it on their own. And some of it is a product of how they are designed, how they play, just playing harder than most other teams on a night to night basis. Like a lot of these things they do because of how they're designed. It's a product of who they are as a team. But at the same time, there has been luck. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that.
The Brewers have their own models too, and they're way more, almost certainly way more inclusive of certain factors than a lot of these public ones are. And I'd be curious to see what their models say.
Yeah.
But they almost certainly think that they have more here than some of these models do.
Right.
So like I think what also stirred people up was, according to this account, the Brewers. So, like in this game, for example, the model called this a lucky win. And again, I don't know, I wouldn't call it lucky win, but I would say like in this particular game, they won in a fashion in which if they played this way in most games, they would lose a
Yeah.
lot of those games. That's the
Yeah,
way
it's
to
not
read this.
sustainable.
And I agree with that. Now, so this account says that they lead baseball this year with 10 lucky wins, so to speak. The thing is, like, if you take those 10 wins off, so what? How many they've got? What? Brewers are 70-44, so they would be what, 60-54 if you take those 10 wins off. That's actually probably pretty close to where I'd put like their true talent level. Like that's still so I think everybody just looks at like, oh, 10 lucky wins and most in baseball, and they read it like you must be saying that all of this Brewers success is luck. Well, if you really like take this model for what it's saying and you say, okay, so they should have been, 6 games above 500, like that's not that crazy actually. that's still a very solid team. And then like kind of on the point of the ways that they kind of beat like a model like this, I could be I could very easily believe like, hey, they've won 5 more games than maybe they should have
Yeah.
based on some things going their way. Then I think that's very realistic, and that's a very, very fair statement to make. And so then if you're making that point and it's like, hey, maybe not 10 wins, but maybe it should have been like 5 or something, and they're a 65 win team as opposed to 70, and they have a winning percentage of like a little bit under 600 or something. I would be like, yeah, that actually is probably very close to how my eye and the way I look at this stuff would probably tell me, like, here's how good they are, and then you add in some things going right on top of it, and you've got 70 wins. The saying is it's better to be lucky than good. Well, it's best to be both. And I think that's kind of what you have going on here right now
Yeah.
with the Brewers. Like the base level ability here is already good. And then you add in some things going their way, especially of late, and that's how you get the best record in baseball. Like that's just kind of how it works. But I'm as someone who uses data and analytics a lot in all of my writing, I'm not going to play the homer game and say, well, now because like some of this says that the Brewers maybe shouldn't be quite this good, I'm just going to pretend it actually is wrong. No, I still believe in the value of this stuff. I still believe that when you know how to use it, it's a good tool for telling you as objectively as possible what's going on. And I'm never going to be perfectly objective because, you can say, well, on the media side, you got to try to be objective. This is the team that I'm around every day. I'm naturally going to have some level of bias toward them as opposed to teams that I'm not watching in person every day. So I'm not going to, play pretend in that way, but I still want to try to be fair and like call things for the way that they're happening. And that's kind of my take on where they're actually at compared to maybe what this stuff says. But more than anything, I just don't like seeing people act like this stuff is all junk. It doesn't matter at all. You shouldn't pay attention to it. No, the right way to go about it is whenever you see something like this, if you are curious about, like, look into why is this being calculated the way it is? What does that say about what's happening? And then look at some other stuff that maybe, you see with the Brewers that is that stuff that's not included in this kind of model, and maybe see where some inconsistencies are and just try to get a read for, okay, what is this tool trying to tell me? How well does it apply to, this team and what's going on? And like just take in as much information as possible, look at the game from as many angles as possible, and just try to come up with the most nuanced explanation for why things are happening. And I think, it goes both ways. Like you can be too reliant on overly simplistic, overly specific metrics, but it's just as bad to go on the other end and say, well, this is what the result was. So that's obviously how it should have gone. No, that's not how it works either. That's way too simplistic. And you're just not going to get any reliable answers that way either. You got to have a good balance, and you have to know what you need to know what you're looking at, what it means. And I think, again, that's where the analytics community can do a better job of defining stuff and use better terminology so that, you don't have some of this kind of confusion.
Yeah. And I think the only other point I'll add is that it's important to realize that just like the eye test will never be perfect, just like just raw surface level stats will never be perfect, nor will any of these machine type of models. Like nothing is ever going to be perfect. That's why, like Jack says, you kind of have to take it all in, and you have to kind of find your own blend and find the right way to look at it. And that's what teams are doing. Like there's not a team out there who is run strictly off of analytics. They are run off of a combo of eye test of what they see when they watch video versus what they see in the numbers versus what they see in the results, and they kind of put it all together, and that's how they create their own version of a model. But even then, that's not going to be perfect either. They will have players that don't hit on their modeling and everything else. I mean, other than the Rockies, they're basically just watching the video. They don't do anything else. But almost every other team has an actual combination of all these things, and nothing is going to be perfect when you are analyzing baseball. There's no such thing as a perfect model, a perfect stat, a perfect number, a perfect video to watch, a perfect anything. It's all just got to be taken in its own form and kind of put out your own opinions and your own ideas and base it off of what you believe, but also understand that there are a lot of things out there that you should take into account. And if you aren't, then you're probably not giving yourself the full picture of what's actually happening.
Let's finish this series, shall we?
Yes.
Game 3, the Brewers won 5-4. Andrew Vaughn homered again. So did Blake Perkins, who hit a 2-run shot. Jose Quintana, probably one of his better starts of the year, actually, from a process standpoint. I know 6 innings, 3 runs isn't going to look amazing, 7 hits, but he struck out 7 and didn't walk anybody. The walks have been an issue for him for a good chunk of the year, but to see him in the strike zone as much as he was in this game, good stuff from him. Michael Harris homered off of Trevor McGill to bring it within 1 in the 9th inning, but he was able to secure the save. I don't know if you saw this thing, but to me, it was like the most obvious. I am hunting a first pitch fastball, and I am going to destroy it. Like with how quickly he started and got his foot down to get out in front of that thing, and it was a big swing too. Like you knew exactly what he was looking for, and he got it. So that's kind of what happened in that at bat.
Yes, that was 100% what happened. I mean, 113 off the bat, he just destroyed that baseball. That is always like the one concern you're always going to have with the reliever like McGill is that when you're a 2-pitch guy, if somebody does it, guess correctly, and you make a mistake, especially, which he did on this one, this was middle, basically. Someone guesses correctly and times it up and gets their foot down and gets the head out on it, like he can give up home runs for in that type of situation. So, yeah, Harris, I mean, that was I think that was the fastest reaction I had to a single ball hit this year where I was like, yep, that's gone. Like the moment that he made contact with it. But yeah, it definitely looked like a guy who just went up there guessing and selling out for a fastball. And again, getting one in basically the worst spot you can throw one when a guy's guessing it. So luckily, 2-run lead didn't end up mattering. He looked very good outside of that in the appearance as well. Like the stuff has continued to look very, very good for McGill, but definitely looked like a guy who borderline knew it was coming, or at least he didn't care if it was a curveball. He was swinging as hard as he could at a pitch down the middle and hoping it was going to be a fastball.
And the hitter is usually kind of the missing piece there, because I bet you could go back and you could see a lot of at-bats where McGill throws that exact same pitch, exact same spot right down the middle, first pitch, and the guy either takes it or he swings and misses or he fouls it back. Well, the difference is, the approach that guy had on that first pitch. Was he going to take a pitch just to calibrate himself? Was he expecting a first pitch curveball, and then just react to fastball if you get one, as opposed to what his approach was there? I think like so many times we get caught in the habit of when it's the team that you're covering or the team you're cheering for and they're hitting, you just talk about their hitters. When they're pitching, you just talk about their pitchers. The reality is it's always a combination of both. It's a cat and mouse game. It's pitcher and hitter. So, you can't just look at, pitcher made a mistake here. Well, yes, it's the pitcher made a mistake, but also, the hitter was either looking for the right pitch or he had the right approach, because you can make that same mistake. And if the hitter's not on his game, you get away with the mistake. It's like and it goes the other way too. This is how baseball works.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. And I mean, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Like there are a lot of mistakes made throughout a game. And to me, that is where the art of pitch calling in general is so important, because I do think that you get away with mistakes because you had them maybe thinking something else. Like that is the most common reason you can get away with a pitch, is because in the back of his head, he was thinking, but it might be a curveball. Like, yeah, it looks like it's a fastball coming down the middle, but it also might fall off a table and go below the zone. And like, if you can have that in their head, that's where you get, he's just laid on it, he fouled it off, and you got away with it. But if it's the first pitch of the at-bat and a guy like Harris goes up there and he's just selling out no matter what for a fastball, then that's what can happen. And that's the cat and mouse game, like you said. And I think that's where, to me, the most important part of the whole equation is timing for hitters. And that's why pitch calling can be so important, because it can allow you to get away with certain things that, including location, that maybe you aren't getting away with if they have a good idea of what the pitch is going to be.
I mean, when you boil it, that's what the cat and mouse game is. It's all timing. From a hitter's standpoint,
Yep.
what do you need to do to be on time with as many kinds of pitches as possible? And then from the pitching side, it's not even like, let's hit my spots. It's how do I disrupt the timing and make sure
Yep.
that he's not on time for this pitch? A lot of times that does involve location, but it also, more than anything, I agree with you, involves what's the pitch call? How am I sequencing? How am I trying to set him up? So it's timing. Baseball is a game of timing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go through some injury updates really quick here. Shelby Miller made what will probably be his lone rehab appearance for Nashville earlier this week. He eviscerated the side. The velo looked good. Everything looks great. He's been on the IL for about a month with a forearm strain, but seemingly ready to come back. We mentioned McGee got sent down. That's almost certainly the precursor to Shelby Miller being called up. So yeah, I mean, he's going to be a very big piece in that bullpen. Nate did ask us, where does he fit in? You know, he predicted that easy answer is McGee, but he didn't want to necessarily lose the length option. And he asked who would be next to send down. I don't know that you really need to send anybody down because you do still have, I mean, you have Ashby can give you length. I still don't think it's a bad, like DL Hall pitching in lower leverage spots. I don't think that's really a waste.
No.
Of DL Hall. Maybe it could, I think it might be more for Ashby just because it's such high octane stuff. But I mean, the reality is like DL Hall very much looks like a Colin Ray or Bryce Wilson type in the bullpen right now. He just does more so than a guy who is blowing guys away out of the pen. He's getting a lot of weak contact. Like on the timing point, I think you can tell that like he's mixing pitches really well where guys are not timing him up great, but he's not in the strike zone enough. He's still walking too many guys. And then the batted ball luck that we've talked about, even if it is weakly hit contact, you know, you're not going to sustain like a 140 BABIP or whatever he had before. So I think they're okay. And it's going to be fine. They have enough guys to cover innings now. And having a fresher Shelby Miller is going to help out, hopefully, with how they use some other guys as well. Jackson Churio is on the IL with a hamstring strain. Latest update from the Brewers is that it's looking like a 2 to 4 week absence. It sounds like a lot of that is going to come down to just how he continues progressing after the PRP injection that he got. He was down for a little bit as they just waited for that to take effect and kind of help him heal up. So we'll see when he returns to play. Couple of lefties. Rob Zastryzny was sent back to another rehab assignment with the Nashville Sounds. He was pulled off a little while ago with some just lingering symptoms from that lat injury. And then Robert Gasser is scheduled for a 3-inning outing of around 45 to 50 pitches on Friday. So he's another guy too who's probably going to be ready to be back in the mix in some capacity in August, though I wouldn't be shocked if they just optioned him to Nashville to continue pitching down there once he's ready to go.
Yeah, I wonder. I'll be curious to see how they handle him because I could see a world in September where they end up putting him in the DL Hall, Aaron Ashby type of role in the bullpen, maybe even overhaul at some point. What is the I can't remember what it is. Do you have to be down in the minors for 20 days to burn that option year?
I believe it's 20.
Okay. Like I'd be curious if they would consider Gasser a better option than him potentially for the playoffs if they would send Hall down with like 19 days left in the season and bring Gasser up and view him as like an actual option for the playoffs because he's looked good in these rehab starts so far. And I just think generally I would probably have more faith that his stuff would get guys out in that type of role than Hall would. But also we'd have to see. I mean, there's so many things that go into playoff rosters, and we don't even know if it would be a wild card or a divisional series or what you'd be looking at to start the playoffs at this point. But that is something that's crossed my mind that I wonder if they would try to save the option year, but at that point, maybe potentially trust Gasser as an option more than Hall. So we'll see where that goes. It'll be interesting to see how his continued rehab starts go here, and as he builds up a little bit more, if the velo that he has shown early on kind of holds, which we've seen him up to 95 already, and the sweeper looks very good. The cutter looks good. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to keep following. But that's just something that crossed my mind at some point this week where I was like, I wonder if they would just try to play that game a little bit and view him as the better option, because I think there's a world where he definitely is the better option. Like, I could absolutely see that being the case. And then again, you could still maintain that one more year of optionality with Hall. And I think at that point, he might be hitting the service time point where you might not be able to after next season. But yeah, that's something I wonder if they're considering at all. But otherwise, it's been cool to see him pitching again. I've just been surprised how good he's looked in the first couple outings. Like, it didn't look like it did not look like most guys I've seen come off of Tommy John and have their first couple of rehab starts. Like, they usually have a little bit more, just a clear, like, oh, the stuff doesn't look as crisp, and then it picks up after the first few, but it just was not like that for him. It looked like it was there right away.
Let's go through our remaining listener questions that we have not touched on yet. We'll start with Older Potato on Twitter, who asks, is there any innings limit that we should be worried about with Quinn Priester, or is he available for any amount of innings? Is his athletic delivery the reason why he can go for more innings? I mean, I'm not worried about it because he's been pitching as a full-time starter for several years now, both in the big leagues and in the minor leagues. I think it's easy to look at like the big league innings total and see that it's never been that high, but I mean, he's been a full-time starter in the minor leagues for quite a few seasons now. I'm trying to go back and look at his innings totals. Yeah, I mean, so he was up over 100 innings last year. Looks like he was around 160 innings in 2023. And there are years on here, like he pitched in the AFL in 2022 as well after throwing 90 innings in the minor leagues. So I would be shocked if there's really like a clear limit on him, especially one that he's going to hit this year. I think you can have him throwing like 150, 160 innings, and they're probably completely okay with that.
Yep, agreed. It looked like a 158 in 2023 is where he's topped out at. So, like, yeah, basically 160, and I'm sure they'd feel comfortable enough going even a little beyond that if they need to, and if the Brewers go far enough into the playoffs or something where he needs to keep pitching. I don't think that's going to be a problem they run into at any point. And on the note of the athletic delivery, like, I don't know if the delivery itself is a ton, but I do think he's just very well built, and he has kind of that, I guess the delivery factors in because it's not the most high stress. It doesn't look like it's super difficult or super taxing. And then again, just kind of has that starter's build and has been built up as a starter for quite a while now. So I don't see it as much of a concern either.
C. Paul Martin asks, what are the best and worst case scenarios for the Brewers as an organization for this year's Rookie of the Year award? There really is no best case scenario. It just doesn't matter a whole lot. The worst case is that Miserowski wins it because he gets that full year of control. But I mean, if Collins wins it, okay, good for him. But he'll have been on the roster the entire year anyway. He's not eligible for like prospect promotion incentives because he wasn't a top 100 prospect. Like, it just doesn't impact anything for anybody outside of, just having that honor from Collins' standpoint. So, I mean, it's really just the worst case scenario is, Miserowski gets a full year of control. Other than that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, Collins does lose a year of control as well if he were to win or finish top two. We should note it's top two finishers. And any top two finishers do get that year of control. I was looking at it earlier today, actually. So it is anybody, but not everybody's eligible for the prospect incentive for the picks, which to me is maybe the thing that they could fix there. I think the top 100 thing is it's a little too, it's just iffy for me. Like, these aren't even affiliated with MLB. Like, these are just Baseball America's list, and like they do great work over there. Don't get me wrong, but I understand the point of this is not really just to reward a team because they had a good rookie. It's to reward a team for calling them up immediately and not trying to get any service time manipulation out of them. But I do think that this should apply to anybody who wins Rookie of the Year if you're going to go this route. It doesn't. So for the Brewers right now, it doesn't mean anything other than they would lose a year for whoever it is. For Collins, if they lose a year, I mean, that's like what, age 33 season or something at the end of his team control at this point. So like, I don't think that benefits either Collins or the Brewers a ton, even assuming if he's very good the rest of his team control years and stays with the Brewers that whole time. So yeah, I don't think there's much of the only main thing to note is if Miserowski finishes top 2, then they would lose that year of control. And that is the biggest deal of anything.
Ron asks if the Brewers are getting hot too early, and is this a sustainable way to win come October? Or am I just pessimistic and traumatized by the past? I mean, it's still very simple for me. It's, are they going to hit for enough power? Because if they don't, no, I don't think this is a sustainable way to win come October. There's just, it might work, but the reality is it's always the playoff randomness thing. You know, I still think it's very possible that if they go in there and they're just not driving the ball enough, you know, some of those singles don't find holes, and you know, now they're in trouble. I think that the whole having traffic thing, they're going to have traffic throughout the playoffs with this lineup because this is what they do. But, you know, it's going to come down to, are they actually able to drive those guys in? And that's where I think it can be a lot more up and down, especially in that small sample, if you don't have the ability to hit a hard line drive in the gap, or better yet, hit one over the fence. You know, a lot of that might come down to what's Andrew Vaughn doing come October? How does William Contreras look come October? Because they've got guys who we've seen now, when they're going well, they have power, and they actually have been hitting for more power during this run where they're putting up more runs because they've got the right guys are kind of on heaters right now. So, you know, we'll see where it lands. But really, that's just the thing for me. It's, are you able to drive the ball enough? And I'm sure in the coming months, we're going to hear all this kind of stuff about how, well, it's the pressure that they put on other teams that plays in October. It's the pressure. That is like the one for, you know, I'm willing to give the Brewers like some leeway on, like, they do some things that some models might not pick up. I don't buy pressure as one of those things that the models doesn't pick up. I think it can work against a team like the Nationals, a team that's really young and inexperienced. Right. But if you're facing a team of like established big leaguers in the playoffs, you're not going to spook them out of being unable to make plays because you're hitting enough, I don't know, weak ground balls and you're hustling them out. Like, I just don't. I get why people say it, but I don't think it's something that actually has a tangible effect that often. So I don't really buy like the grinding pressure, like, especially against the teams that they would be playing in October. I'm not sure that that's actually something that's as impactful as it's sometimes drawn up to be.
Yeah, I think one thing I've thought of recently is that some of the advantage that the Brewers do have during the regular season in terms of going hard every single play and doing a lot of these things, like some of those just kind of go away in the playoffs because now everybody's hustling everything out.
Yep,
and
exactly.
like you don't have that advantage anymore. So like, I agree with you on everything you said. Just to touch on the, are they getting hot too early thing, like there's been a lot of research over the years that that's just not really a thing. Like, it doesn't, in the end, how you went into October just doesn't matter that much at the end of the season. It's, did you get hot in October? That's really all that ends up mattering. And like we've talked about, like the Brewers have shown signs that they can have stretches where they have the power in there, and you get Churio back healthy, and him, Contreras, Yelich, and Vaughn are all hitting for some power in the playoffs. Like, that's where you can actually make that work. But it's still an if. And yeah, I agree with everything Jack said. Like, this current way that they are playing, I shouldn't say that. The current way they just played on the road trip with the power showing up, that is more sustainable. But the overall way that they've played most of the season, where they haven't had that power consistently, that part is not sustainable, and they will need to have that power if they're going to make a legitimate run in October.
I like the way you phrase it, because like, I feel like we hear so much of the, well, the playoffs are a different game and now this stuff matters somewhat. Well, I mean, every pitch matters more. So yeah, like you said, guys are going to be grinding out, every situation, maybe even more so than they might in the regular season, like hustling everything out. Like you said, every pitch is a battle. I mean, the reality is like the numbers are out there. You win playoff the best way to win playoff games is by hitting a lot of home runs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's generally the best way to win any game because if you're hitting lots of home runs, you're probably scoring more runs than the other team. But like the numbers are out there. The numbers in the playoffs when you out homer somebody else. The winning percentage is, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's like close to 800. Like it's very, very high. So the Brewers do have an advantage in that they're not going to allow a ton of home runs to begin with. So I think that there's a way they can win without having to hit as many as other teams might need to. But I think a lot of it is going to come down to, do they hit for enough power? And if they do get eliminated pretty quickly, I would not be shocked if it's a series where they have a lot of guys on base and they don't knock them in because maybe a single that has been a single at times this year is caught, or something just doesn't break their way and they're just not able to get the big hit that is a little bit less reliant on some of the little things going your way. The kind of how it has played out at times in the regular season. Final question we'll take, baseball related question we'll take, comes from Michael, who asks, how much of the offensive development has been just waiting for the young guys to grow into their bodies? I think that applies very much to like what Sal Frelick's doing this year, what we talked about with Turang beforehand. I think some of those guys who are starting to find like little bit more game power, I think that's where you're seeing it. As far as like the group on the whole, I wouldn't say it's like a major storyline throughout the offense up and down.
Yeah, I think more than actually growing into their body, I just think general patience with young hitters has probably paid off for some of these. Like, I think there are teams who may have started to give up on what they were seeing offensively quicker than the Brewers have, and kind of sticking with some of these guys just generally may be paying off more than anything else. But yeah, I think Frelick and Turang are definitely the two that you would highlight in terms of actually like putting on some weight and allowing them to start to tap into some of that power. I think otherwise it's mostly just been, kind of letting them work through some of the struggles and come out on the other end.
Jake asked, what does Jack's hair care routine consist of? Every morning, shampoo and condition separately. I'm not using any of that 2-in-1 crap. Like just shampoo and then just conditioner. Settle for nothing less because these crappy hybrids don't get the job done. Usually I throw like some hair paste in there when it's got to be like the right amount of, it can't be sopping wet. I have to get like all of the standing water and the drops of moisture out, but it still needs to be a little bit damp when you put like the product in, and then blow dry it just enough. Like if you over dry it and it gets too dry, it gets like kind of poofy and puffed out, and that doesn't really look good. So like maybe I'll dry it like 80% or something, and then I got to let it air dry the rest of the way, and it hope it just kind of settles the right way for that day. I it's still not a perfect science. Like I don't think I have it fully down. Like some days it looks better than others, but it's not for a lack of effort.
No, it certainly is not. I don't think anyone wants to hear my hair care routine, but it's basically get out of the shower. I'm with you. I don't do the 2-in-1 stuff. That is separate.
Good.
They're separate. But then I get out of the shower. I comb it quickly. I put my clothes on. I'm usually running late to work. And then I comb my hair in the car on the way to work half the time while I'm at red lights. So that's about what my hair care routine is. It's usually totally different levels of how wet it is when I'm on my way to work, but yeah, not quite as much goes into it, and it shows. I think it shows pretty clearly between the two of us. So I respect your patience on that matter because I just do not have that for anything.
Well, so the easy days are the days where I'm not really like doing anything crazy in public and I don't have to put anything in it and I can just throw a hat on. Like when I was in college, I probably wore a hat like 80% of the days that I was in class if I didn't have to, dress super nicely for any reason. But now when I'm at the ballpark, I have to look put together. So then we have to put the effort in. But like today, there was no game today. So like I was wearing a hat most of today. And that takes a little bit of the time consuming nature of it off my plate.
That's fair.
That's enough time on that. Let's go to Spencer's minor league sandbox.
Oh, we're not asking the question about what do we yearn for? Well, my answer was going to be I yearn for the minor league sandbox, so that's okay. We did get a couple questions on the minor league side, though. One of them from Mattingly Sideburns, who asked, earlier this season, there was some buzz of Cooper Pratt being on a trajectory to make the big league roster at some point in the 2026 season. Given his struggles at the plate in AA, do you think that 2026 is a realistic premiere for him? So I would still say it's within the realistic realm of possibility. Like I still have seen a decent amount of good things from him at the plate. I think the hope was that we'd start to see a little bit more power, which hasn't really happened yet. But I've still seen enough good things at the plate to not rule out 2026 because the defense has been very good at short. But at one point, I wondered if he would make the opening day roster for the Brewers. That would be a pretty big surprise to me now. I think we're looking at, if he does come up in 2026 sometime later in the season, probably mid-season, if not even maybe getting that September call-up as his first opportunity. But I think 2026 is still possible. I wouldn't say I would bank on it. But even if it does happen, I think it's going to be later than I maybe initially thought was possible. Aaron asked, does Mate and Pena being in Appleton suggest that they will start next year in AA, or would that be too aggressive of an assignment? I wouldn't put it past them. I'm going to talk about them a little bit in the sandbox, so I'll get to them in a second and how they've been performing since they were called up to Appleton. But I would say if you have a chance to go see them this year and you are hoping to see them in Appleton, I would try to make that trip. Now, I don't know what they're going to do, but I thought I was going to be able to catch Jackson Churio early in the following season after he had been promoted to Appleton, and I was not able to do so. So they will be aggressive with these guys. They're going to continue to be aggressive with them, so it just would not shock me if they end up in Biloxi to start next year. So like I said, if you have a chance to go see them and you really want to, you should go see them this year if you can. Moving into the hitter portion of the sandbox, I got 3 DSL guys to talk about this week, starting with Carlos Doña. He was featured by Brewers PD, I believe, today. Since the July 8th, he has a 968 OPS. He's hit 4 homers, a triple, and 6 doubles. This is a guy that I think I talked about very early in the DSL season. He had a good first week, and then he really struggled up until this July 8th date where he took off. But a very, very good athlete. He's mostly played right field and some left field, but he definitely has the arm for right field, and he's clearly got some power. I had originally heard that his swing was kind of tailored for ground balls. Watching him swing this year does not appear to be the case. There looks like there's pretty good ability to get to some loft, and obviously he's hit 4 homers in the last month. Pretty interesting player. He was a 2024 signee, 6-figure bonus, so he wasn't, he was a pretty decent signing for them in that class, and he missed all of last season with injury, but he's had a very solid season this year, and especially in this last month. So he'll be 18 all season, a guy who could be in the ACL at 19 next year, which is a very normal age. One to watch, I would say. I think there might be something here. The biggest name from this past class, 2025 class, is Braylon Antonez. He hit his first pro home run this past week. I tweeted out the video of that because he had put it on his Instagram. He smoked it. He knew he got it. He pimped it pretty good. Maybe not the best season overall for what was expected from him this year. But when I watched the video, what I've heard from a couple of people who have seen him down there, One, there's been some decently bad luck involved. Two, I think he has a profile that might explode a little bit just with a little more strength. He's hitting a lot of like deep fly outs right now. His exit velos he's hit plenty of balls like over 100 miles per hour, but if you're only hitting those deep flyouts at like 95, they're not going to go out very often. But if you tap into a little bit more power with some more strength, all of a sudden those become 100-mile-per-hour fly balls, and those do end up going out. So I am definitely not giving up on Antunez after a bit of a disappointing DSL season. To this point, he still has some season left to maybe pick things up. But very, very talented guy. And when you watch the swing, if you go watch the video, it's pretty hard not to get some Jackson Churio vibes from it. Like there's definitely some similarities there. Who also got off to a really slow start in the DSL. I think people forget he was so for 21 to start his DSL career, and then he really didn't pick things up until the last month of his season. So we'll have to see where it turns out, but I'm still betting on the talent with Antunez. Alexander Frias, I've talked about now 3 in a row, I believe. He hit his first pro home run this past week as well, and he really gives me the Handle Fry Encarnacion vibes from last year where he missed a good chunk of the beginning part of the season. I think there's going to be a lot more power than he's maybe shown so far in games. He doesn't have huge whiff issues. He takes walks. He's a good athlete. He's got a cannon in right field. Frias does. Yeah, I'm a fan of Frias. I think kind of like Fry did this year, I think the breakout might come out in the ACL rather than the DSL. Mike Bovey had a really good week. He had 6 hits, a double, and a homer amongst them. The home run came to right center in a tough park to homer, and it's a place that not many balls go out to right center. So it was a nice poke, and hopefully starting to get him going again on offense. It's been a little bit of an up and down season, battling some of the shoulder injury that he had in the offseason, and just not necessarily what you were hoping to see in AA from him this year, but also he's been pretty close to a league average hitter, so it's not been a complete loss by any means. A bunch of notable promotions happened this week. I mentioned Jesus Mate and Luis Pena earlier. Pena homered in his first high A at bat, and then Jesus Mate later tripled, driving in a couple of runs. Today, Jesus Mate hit a 111-mile-per-hour exit velocity home run to right field. Absolutely crushed it. Line drive, got out in a hurry. Showed the talent off in a lot of ways. He scored from first on like a bloop double down the left field line earlier in the game. Pena had another good game. He had a single up the middle that he stretched into a double because nobody was covering. They're showing off the talent early and pretty often this week. So it's been fun to watch and kind of pay attention to. And like I said, if you have a chance to go see them, I would absolutely recommend going and seeing them in person. Speaking of Handle Fry Encarnacion, he was promoted to low A from the ACL. In his debut, he went 1 for 3 with a walk and a single. He was playing right field. Again, I think that's probably where he ends up longer term in the outfield, but really big fan of his. I'm very excited to be able to watch him regularly. Of course, now the Mudcats have been rained out 2 games in a row leading into this, so he's only played 1 game, but it was a solid start for him. Catcher Kevin Garcia, also promoted to low A. He only turned 18 a couple of weeks ago. He's 4 for 8 so far with 2 doubles. I really like his swing. I think he has some whiff issues from what I have heard, but there's big time power. It's a quick swing. It's a quiet setup. The type of swing where I feel like maybe you can figure some things out and some of that whiff goes away. But even still, he's an 18-year-old catcher already in full season ball showing some pop. So I think that's noteworthy no matter what. Eduardo Garcia was promoted to AA. Very well deserved. He finished high A with his lowest strikeout rate of his career and his highest walk rate. He had a 118 WRC plus, and in his first AA game, he went 2 for 4 with a double and a walk. Ethan Murray was moved to AAA to make room for Garcia. Also very well deserved. He finished his time in AA with the 12th highest WRC plus for hitters who had at least 250 plate appearances this year. He wasn't quite a qualified hitter, but he was very close. So I put it at 250, and he was 12th in all of AA. I believe he was 4th in the Southern League behind Luke Adams, and Brock Wilkin, and then one other hitter. 1 for 7 in his couple of AAA games to this point. One notable pitcher promotion, Jaron DeBerry was moved to AA. He went 6 shutout, or not 6 shutout. He went 6 innings with no earned runs, 1 unearned run, and he struck out 4 in his first outing. I'm just still a really big fan. They put out video of the outing on the Brewers PD account as well today. I love the way the cutter has been coming along this year. I think he's started to throw it harder. I saw a lot more like 90, 91 on the cutter versus earlier in the season, kind of 86, 87, but the movement looks very similar. The sinkers come a long way. The changeups come a long way from where they were in college. Like, he did not have great results in high A, but I think he has been steadily improving this year. The one big thing is if he can still have a little bit more of a velo jump in him with his frame, I think is possible. If he can get to being like a sits 93, touches 95 type of guy, I think he gets very, very interesting because he has a wide array of interesting secondaries, and he has the 3 fastball mix, and they're all pretty decent. Yeah, he's one that I'm still very high on. A couple other pitchers to talk about. I've talked about Dustin Mayorkian a lot lately, but the Brewers put out some video of him finally. The feedback just around the DSL is very, very strong on him. He's been very good. His last outing, he went 4 perfect innings with 4 strikeouts. Watching the video, the only question I have for him is the delivery. I think it's not super fluid, and I wonder a little bit if to me, he looks like a guy who could use some improvement in the hip mobility department. It just looks like a guy who kind of struggles to be able to get into his hips. But the stuff looks good. I mean, all the breaking balls, the changeup. I mean, it looks like it plays. And like I said, he's 17 down there doing a very, very good job. Now an ERA under 2, he is striking out way more than he's walking. I mean, all the things that you're looking for in a DSL pitcher, he's doing statistically, and the stuff I think is pretty good. So he's one I'll continue to watch. Moving to a couple of AA relievers, Zach Peak this past week, that rhymed, went 5 innings, 3 hits, 3 walks, 9 strikeouts, and did not allow a run. He's now up to 28 innings in AA. He has a 2.89 ERA with 30 strikeouts. He throws kind of the kitchen sink as a reliever. He's got the 4-seam and a 2-seam. The fastball sits in that 91 to 93 range, but he's touching 95 a little more consistently lately. He throws a slider in the mid-80s, and he uses it a lot. The curveball is in that upper 70s range. And then he also mixes in like a mid-80s changeup that shows some decent flashes of having good fade to it too. Like, he's 27. He's in AA. He was a minor league Rule 5 pick this past season, but I like the stuff. I think there's a potential role for him at some point down the line. It'll be interesting because I think he's a minor league free agent this year, so they may have to try and re-sign him to another minor league deal if they can. Another Biloxi reliever, Brian Fitzpatrick, was a 10th round pick out of Rutgers in 2022. He went from sitting kind of 90, 91, topping out at 93, 94, to this year he's sitting 94, 95. He's a 6'7" lefty. I think the slider and changeup are both pretty good secondaries, and he'll mix a curveball in as well. He currently has a 2.06 ERA in AA, 2.9 FIP, 28.8% strikeout rate to only a 7.8% walk rate. With the velo jump, he's a Rule 5 eligible this year. If there was going to be like a surprise out of nowhere protection, I think that might be the guy I would guess they might be higher on than kind of the consensus. I think the stuff has really ticked up, and he already had solid command. He had good secondaries, but the velo jump from that type of frame, he's interesting. And then finally, Jesus Lorenzo, never talked about him on here, but he was a minor league free agent signing this winter. He's 30 years old. He's not a prospect, but since July started, he's thrown 12 innings of 2 earned runs, which is a 1.5 ERA. He's got 14 strikeouts to only 1 walk. It's a pretty good pitch mix. Again, he's 4-seam, Cutter / slider. I would consider it more of a slider that I think is a pretty good slider. The fastball sits at like that 96 range. He's gotten up to 98, 90, almost 99. It was like 98.6, I think. He's the highest, but he gets a ton of whiffs on the fastball. He gets a bunch of whiffs on his changeup as well. And then he throws a sinker, and he also, like I said, throws that cutter / slider quite a bit. So interesting profile. Again, probably not somebody I would expect the Brewers to call up at any point this year unless something weird happens. But if they keep him in the organization, there is some interesting stuff here, and it's a pretty low arm angle as well. So somebody that I will be keeping an eye on if they're able to, keep him around in the organization next year. But that is all I have for this one. Like I said, a lot of fun promotions, which is always, I kind of figured that might happen after the trade deadline, but I didn't really know for sure if we were going to see Mate and Pena and Encarnacion and just a lot of guys that I'm a big fan of moving up. And more than anything, I get to watch all the Carolina guys now instead of just having to follow along with ACL box scores and random video that I find on Instagram or Twitter. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, it was a good week in the minor league world for the Brewers.
It's going to do it for us this week on the show. Spencer, enjoy your vacation. You probably won't be hearing from me on next week's show because I will be on vacation next week. So we stagger that out quite nicely. We'll see if we can find a fill-in, though. I'm sure we will. We have a lot of deep connections within the baseball community at this point.
Oh, yeah.
We'll find somebody. We will still, however, keep the release schedule on track. Next episode will be out next Friday with Spencer and whomever else ends up co-hosting the show with him. But until then, thank you all for listening.